Hello Internet, my name is Quinn and this will be Blondihacks. As you can see, I'm sitting in a big empty garage, which is going to be the new shop. I'm very excited to get started on this space. The big truck will not be delivering my workbenches and all my other tools for quite a while yet, but in the meantime, we can get started fixing up the walls and fixing up the lighting and doing lots of other stuff. So let's go. I had some time to kill before the moving truck gets here with all my stuff, which is good because, well, the 90s called and they want this garage back. It was painted sort of a two-tone brown and pink, which was not going to do for filming or for my mental health. Luckily, I had a friend who was willing to fly 1,500 miles and paint my shop. That, my friends, is the definition of a best friend. She loves to paint, and luckily I love to watch people paint, so this worked out great. I did also consider doing the floors before all the stuff got here, but they had an epoxy treatment on them already, which was in good condition, and I was frankly running out of time and money for further improvements before the big truck gets here. Speaking of which, the big truck showed up shortly thereafter, and here is all my stuff. They put the benches mostly in the right area, but I'm going to have to move things around, and, well, I got to start unpacking a little bit before I can even do any work in here. Now, the $64,000 question, did my drawer packing system work? And the answer is, yes it did. Look at that. Nothing moved in there, so I'm very pleased with that. I won't have to spend a week sorting out hardware. The number one problem I'm trying to avoid with packing drawers is, well, this problem right here. If things get dislodged, they can wedge upwards in the drawer and make the drawer impossible to open. That was why I took so much care to pack the hardware drawers the way I did. The Squeezy Bits drawer here did get a little bit jammed up, but I was able to clear it. So in hindsight, I probably should have unloaded that drawer. Now the real work begins though. The movers did put my benches in roughly the right area, but I need to get them fully installed and leveled, of course. So I'm going to start by getting this wheelie cabinet out of the way here. This thing has spring-loaded casters under it like a library stool. This is a proper industrial cabinet that I salvaged. That was a good find. And I'll get in here with some steel bar and my floor jack and use it to lift this bench up, get it level. If you're interested in how this bench was built, I did a blog post on it many years ago. I built this before I had YouTube going. I used grade 8 bolts on the underside of each leg there for leveling feet, and that works very, very well. So I'm using the 3-point method here, which is that you fully retract one foot and then level the other 3, because 3 points will always form a plane, and it's much easier to level a 3-footed thing. And then once you've got it level on 3 feet, then you just lower the remaining foot until it contacts the ground and there's weight on it, and you're done. This bench weighs about 500 pounds, so I am being very careful not to get my fingers under it while I do this. This bench has a small extension that makes it into an L shape, which can be separately leveled. It hangs from the main bench on threaded rod, but it's right at the limit of what I can safely lift, and I need to be crawling around underneath it while I level it, so I decided to go ahead and throw the engine hoist on it. It has holes drilled in it for the mill to mount to, so it was easy to just bolt the crane to it. And that allows me to shift it over, lower it down under the threaded rod, and then lift it back up and get those nuts installed in there without ever having to place my noggin underneath it. Even this little extension is a couple hundred pounds of steel. It's substantially overbuilt, let's just say, but it was fun to make. The important design detail here is that it has its own leveling feet, and then the threaded rod connections act as levelers as well, so that the L-shaped extension can be separately leveled from the main bench, because it's virtually impossible to completely level an L-shaped bench that's all one piece, not to mention the fact that it wouldn't go through any doors in the world. A couple hours of work later, everything's leveled, so I can just slide that rolling cabinet back underneath the thing here. And now for the ceremonial reinstallation of the bench vise. Here you see the Canadian Honor Guard wearing the traditional hiking pants and sweaty promotional t-shirt, as is tradition. This is a beautiful ceremony dating back dozens of years to Canada's earliest history. One approach to unpacking is to just try to do work, and then you're forced to dig out tools and parts that you need in order to do projects, and gradually you get unpacked. In this case, I needed to dig out some scrap metal and make some shims to go under the feet here to get the bench elevated a little bit. Fun fact, this bench was designed and built for my previous garage, which had a much steeper slope on the floor, which was nice for drainage, but made it very difficult to level anything. This garage has a much flatter floor, and so I needed to adjust my leveling system a little bit there to get things up in the air higher to clear my little tool cabinet. Metric fist pump of victory. Another relic from the old shop is this chunk that's cut out of the backsplash on my workbench because there was an electrical box there that I couldn't move, but now that's going to be a magnet for small things to disappear forever. This was another salvage. I repainted this thing and put a new top on it, and luckily I have material left over so I can cut a chunk to fit in that hole there. Good thing I skipped that extra cheeseburger at lunch because I can just barely get back here. This bench is very heavy and I don't want to move it any further than I have to here in order to get this block back in here and screwed into place. Lastly, with the bench in place, I'll do a bit of a Hail Mary and see if maybe I can level this thing. You may not know this, but this bench was very out of level in my last shop, again because of the steepness of the floor and the fact that this is a cabinet style bench, not spindly legs, so it's difficult to level. But in this shop, it's quite close to level, so I might have a shot here of shimming it. In my old shop, it needed so many shims. I did actually try that the whole bench got really unstable with the amount of wedges under one side of it, so it just wasn't practical, and I've lived with a crooked bench for 10 years, which is super annoying. But this is close enough that I think I can level it with just a couple of wedges and it'll remain stable. And that's really exciting. I will have a level primary workbench for the first time in a decade. That's going to be good for my mental health. Okay, enough faffing about. I know you want to know what I want to know, which is, did the machine tool survive the trip? Well, let's find out. Get all the screws off the lid here, and survey says, oh. Oh, it looks pretty good. Nothing moved. Everything is clean and oiled. No rust anywhere. I think little lathe buddy has survived the trip. And little mill buddy looks good too. Nothing moved. Nothing got banged into. The crates are intact. So all signs are good for the machine tools having survived their 2,500 kilometer journey. My process for depalleting these will be quite similar to how I palleted them. I'm going to start by jacking up the pallet with a floor jack and getting some blocking underneath them so that there will be clearance for the legs on the crane. Before I actually do the lift, I'm going to prepare the bench here. These benches, if you haven't read my blog, have a top surface that is the factory hot rolled plate finish, and I find that just keeping it regularly oiled with whey oil makes it nice and clean and rust free. This is a finish that's worked really, really well for me. The oil absorbs into the steel and it's not oily to the touch, but it stays rust free as long as you keep reapplying it periodically. From here, installation is basically the reverse of removal. I've got my straps on there and I pull the bolts out, and now I can lift it up off of the pallet. One learning here is I should have marked the front of the machines on the crates so that I could have instructed the unloading crew which direction to orient them. I didn't do that, and wouldn't you know, bad luck, both crates are pointing the opposite of where I need them to be. So I needed to spin the machine around, which I did by putting a half twist in the strap and then lifting it up and unwinding the strap, setting it back down, and repeating that until the mill was facing the right way. Then I could pull the pallet out and wheel it over to the bench. Lift it up and let it down into position. Getting the bolt holes aligned on the bench is actually quite easy. The secret to this is that hydraulics are very precise. You can use them to take like 80% of the weight of the machine, and then what's left is something that you can easily muscle around until you get all the bolts aligned. So this is actually much simpler than it seems, and it's a lot easier here than it is on the pallet when you're working on the ground and trying to crawl around and you can't get a good position on the crane and so on. Over to the lathe now. The lathe is too big to spin on the crane the way that I did with the mill, so instead I'm going to spin the crate before I unload it. I'm going to do this with an old racer's trick for moving cars, which is that you put some cardboard or something slippery under one corner, and then you jack up one side on a floor jack, and you can actually wheel it around. Now I can't get the jack under there at a good angle, so I've got some heavy round bar there, and I'll use that to jack up one corner. The secret is that the wheels on the floor jack have to be describing the arc that you want the car, or in this case crate, to move in. And then you can quite easily move a heavy load like this, just pivoting it on one corner. This little quarter turn gave me the access that I needed to get the crane well aligned. And now I can tear down the walls of the crate here once again. I'm pleased to say that my crates survived extremely well. They weren't built super sturdy, but once again, these were just moving truck crates, not ocean liner transcontinental shipping crates. I tried the same trick of blocking up the pallet, but unfortunately, as you can see, the pallet still didn't allow the legs to clear there, so I'm again leveraging the precision of hydraulics and lifting it just enough to where the lathe will slide forward once the weight is off it, and then let it set, and then pull it a little further. I was able to slide it forward onto some blocks that I had set up here at the same level as the top surface of the pallet there. Then once it was close, I shortened up the strap there so it was safer to lift, and set it down on the feet and wheeled it over to the bench. Then I was able to lift it up on the bench just like how I took it down in the old shop. Once again, with the crane taking most of the weight, it's pretty easy to muscle it around to get the bolts aligned. A tapered punch is also a big help there. And with the lathe sat down and all the bolts in place, I can get the straps out of there, and it is mostly installed. Well, that's a relief to have the benches all leveled, set up, and both machine tools back in their homes. The lathe will need re-leveling and realigning, of course, because it's been moved, but that will come along later. Now, you may have noticed the first half of this video looked a little weird, and that's because the lighting in this shop is terrible. Absolutely terrible. So that has to be fixed, and for that I have about $1,000 worth of fancy new LED lighting here. These are the same lights I used in my old shop, so I want to put them in here as well because the lighting is very much responsible for the look of the videos. The color temperature and the type of lighting I use gives my videos the look that I like. I'll show you how these lights work real quick because I really like them. These are by Lithonia. They're LED shop lights. I'll link to them below. Hashtag not sponsored. I paid for these with my own money and I have no contact with this company. I just really like these lights, so I'll show them to you. The LED strip portion here actually unclips. You just pry it off with your fingers, and then you can open it up, and the lighting section of it disconnects from the power supply with this nice quick connector here. So you can disconnect this and then install the chassis up on the ceiling and then easily reconnect the LED section afterwards. That makes it quite easy. Very simple connections here, just a live, a neutral, and a ground, and it even comes with the wire nuts. And I can hear all the Europeans furiously composing comments with their scathing opinions of wire nuts, and yeah, we know, but look, we've been building houses with them in North America for decades, and properly used, they're fine. And they're code here, so they're gonna get used. From this point on, I'm not going to be telling you what I'm doing because electrical code and laws vary wildly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And the rules about who can do what and who needs to be licensed to do what vary dramatically as well. So this is not an instructional video on how to wire up lighting in your shop. This video is for entertainment purposes only, and this should not be considered instructional in any way. In my case, I'm using a round junction box to replace the light socket that was there, and then I'm mounting the lights adjacent to that. If you get lucky and the lights happen to land on studs, then you can just mount them with wood screws because they're actually very, very light. It's a nice thing about using LEDs, but of course, no one's ever that lucky, so you'll end up using toggle bolts or something similar as I'm doing here. Toggle bolts, if you haven't seen them, are kind of a high-strength drywall anchor. They can carry a really surprising amount of weight, actually. They're very strong, much stronger than these lights need. These 8-foot lights are pretty unwieldy. They're difficult to install by one person, but it can be done. They're actually very light. They're just awkward because of how long they are. But they have keyhole mounting slots on them, so you put in the first bolt, then you hook it on, mark where the other bolt is going to land, then drill the other hole, put the other bolt in, and then you can hook it onto both bolts and tighten them down. Again, not easy to do with one person, but it can be done. I would recommend getting a friend if you can. Then it's a simple matter of hooking up the wiring, and you can plug the LED strip section back in with that quick connector, and then that snaps back in place. So I really do like these lights. They're not the cheapest option, but they're really quite easy to install, and they're very, very bright. I'm very pleased with them. And because they're LED, they're so low power that off a standard 15 amp light circuit like this, you can run a whole pile of these things. I mean, all the ones you see me installing here is something like 3 amps. Like, it's really nothing. Furthermore, by replacing the old bare bulbs that were in the ceiling with these things, these lights will now operate on the wall switch, which is very convenient. And on the first day, the science team at General Electric who invented the transistor said, "Let there be light." And they saw that the light was good and that it separated us from the darkness. Well, there's the final setup there. You can see it's just a simple couple of junction boxes with the lights joined right up to them. This worked out really well to put 4 of those 8-foot lights in there, and then I've got a couple of the 4-footers and the 2-footers, which will be used for task lighting later on when I get some cabinets and other accoutrements in here. This is all starting to look very lovely, but of course behind the camera is my secret shame. I still have a lot of shop-related boxes to unpack. However, let's ignore that problem for now, focus on this beautiful new shop space that's coming together. Pretty soon I'll be able to make some chips and some real videos for you in here. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks especially to my Patreons who've really stuck with me through this move and really supported all these big costs that I've had during the transition. It means the world to me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.